Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to my road to Deadpool and Wolverine. With Deadpool and Wolverine being less than 2 weeks away, I am reviewing every 20th Century Fox X-Men movie. I have reviewed every one from X-Men 1 up to the Wolverine. Check those videos out, linked in the eye in the right-hand corner. But for right now, it's time to get into the good stuff. X-Men Days of Future Past. And joining me to talk about that film is from 3D Movie Cinema. It is Jacob Collins doing his best CM Punk pose.
No, it was an X-Men. Like it was, I like how like in Wolverine, he always has like on the X-Men covers, he's like this, he's like,
There are two versions of this film, the regular cut and the road cut. We watched the road cut, not for any particular reason other than I've talked
we want
about
him more
Rogue.
rogue.
Well, yes, and I've talked about Rogue in X-Men 1, 2, and 3, so if she appeared in this one. So I'm like, all right, I mean, it only makes sense to like because this is where her story pretty much ends. So I feel like it was only right to cover how she essentially like her happy ending sort of kind of. So I figured it would be fun to cover the road cut because I saw the theatrical cut in theaters, really loved it. Then I saw the road cut upon like its release, and that was even better. So I'm a road cut guy myself.
The whole it also makes more sense why like in so, like the theatrical, why don't they use Cerebro to like track Mystique around, and then you see her in the road cut, she smashes. Like it's not just about there's seeing more scenes, it's actually there's more stuff that happens in the thing. Like obviously how the Sentinels find the X-Men, and obviously there's the only thing I don't like, there's two things I don't like in the road cut. The first thing I don't like in the road cut is how when Beast asks Wolverine, "Hey, in the future, do I die?" And Wolverine goes, and he's just sitting there smoking a cigar and casually says, "No." And then Beast is like just sad. He's like about to cry. And then he's like, "Hey, kid," he goes, "That's only my future. That doesn't mean anything. We could change that." He's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm just like, at least in the theatrical cut, he's like, "Do I in the future? Do I make it?" He goes, "No, but we can change that." That actually makes it a more powerful moment compared to it's just a sad, depressing moment. I'm just like, this is more sad than it is funny. This is like sad. But and also the scene where Magneto, I will say, I do wish Bryan Singer would have included a longer like the scene the whole scene in the road cut where Magneto, it's the scene where both young Magneto's breaking into like the Pentagon to steal his equipment. I don't like how the scene is played out, where it's like it shows you both versions. Like you're seeing old Magneto break into Cerebral Mansion. I'm like, I understand why they're doing that because it's young Magneto and old Magneto, but I kind of wish I like just old young Magneto breaking in there himself, and I like how he's got the balls around the guy, like the little metal balls, just like it's a nod to X-Men 2. And then the guy goes there and hits him in the head and knocks him out. My favorite I do like in the extended the road cut where how he takes off his glasses, and that just that shot of him where he takes the glasses off and he sees the coin. Young Magneto sees the coin that he killed Kevin Bacon with. I'm just like that scene that was just so good. You
It's
see like the
really
whole nod to first class. I'm like, it's so good.
normies have fidget spinners. Magneto has those two metal balls that he sometimes hits people with. This movie came off of the Wolverine. That was the last X-Men movie, and I
Yeah.
talked about it. I talked about it with Phil a couple days ago, and we both agreed that we liked it, but we didn't love it. I feel like that was kind of a damp squib to kind of leave things off of, but man, well, first of all, kind of zooming out a bit, talk about what an epic year for movies, period, 2014 was, but then look even a little closer. Look at how good superhero movies were back then. You got Captain America, Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, this. I'm sure I'm missing a big one, but
Amazing Spider-Man 2,
that
Ninja
does not
Turtles
count.
2014,
Those two do not count.
Transformers Age of Extinction.
That also does not count. Stop it.
Yeah.
But
It's sad. That movie made $1 billion. That movie made $1 billion, Transformers Age of Extinction.
depressingly, it made a
I went
billion.
into a packed theater. I was in a packed theater watching that movie with my little cousin and my uncle. And it was a packed theater. And everybody, every time like there's a joke, everybody's like, ah ha ha ha. And at the end, everybody gave it like, woohoo. And
We
then
all
I was
enabled
like,
Michael Bay
I
for a
could see.
decade. We should be ashamed of ourselves.
Oh, we did. I went to look. I'm telling you now. I saw Transformers 2, 3, 4. and 5 in theaters and Bumblebee. I literally you could tell the decline though. Whenever it's like after 4, it just became a decline. When you watch 5, it's like, oh, 5 was a sold out showing the first night. Then the next night, you're just like, oh, this theater's empty because they saw the opening movie. They're like, oh, Michael Bay's sucks now.
We were talking about it off air. I feel like the X-Men movie should have ended here, and we can talk about Logan, and that review will be coming up a little later on this week here on the channel. But as far as this goes, I feel like the mainline X-Men movie should have ended with this one. I said on Threads that they never got this good again, and people were like, Logan, I'm talking about mainline called
X-Men titled movies.
exactly. They never
Which,
got
to
this.
be fair, there's only 2 movies left in the franchise at that point. There's X-Men, and they're both in the prequel trilogy timeline too.
Yeah.
One and
Apocalypse
yeah,
and Dark Phoenix. Like I said, they never got this good
it's
again.
like
And
The Price is Right. It declines after that. It's like down and then way down.
but we started off at the end of the Wolverine with that mid-credit scene, one of the best parts of the movie, subtly, where Magneto meets Wolverine in the airport, and then we see Charles Xavier is not dead, for he is surely alive. And then we open with this movie, basically the opening of Terminator 2. Let's just call it what it is. Like I'm sure Kinberg was like, "Oh, copy that, copy that."
He actually, it was Matthew Vaughn and Jane Goldman that wrote this because they were going to direct this movie. Matthew Vaughn was going to direct X-Men: Days of Future Past.
Wow.
Originally, Matthew Vaughn was going to direct. It was going to be originally before Bryan Singer decided to make it about pitched him on Days of Future Past. It was supposed to be called X-Men Second Class, and he wanted to make it like just a continuation about the Kennedy assassination and everything else, and Magneto trying to cause it. And then, of course, Singer told him, "What about Days of Future Past?" And then Matthew Vaughn read the comic and he goes, "Ooh, I like this, yeah." And he said the only difference between his version and Singer's version was he wanted Hugh Jackman to be Wolverine in the future, but he wanted Tom Hardy to be Wolverine in the past. Because Kingsman was coming, he really wanted to make Kingsman, and Fox told him, "Well, you can make X-Men: Days of Future Past, or you can make this." And so he told Jane Goldsmith, I mean, X-Men's going to get made regardless, but Kingsman's not going to get made regardless. So he chose Kingsman, and then Fox is like, "We have no director," and then they're like, Bryan Singer's like, "I'll do it." And then he changed some things. Like he said, "Well, I'm putting Quicksilver." He told Hugh Jackman, "No, you're not just gonna have a small role. You're gonna be Wolverine for the whole film." And he told that he said, oh, Chainward, he told Simon Kinberg, "Hey, we're gonna rewrite the scene with Quicksilver instead of that." And that also led to a lawsuit with Marvel Studios.
This movie is 2.5 hours long. It flies by. We get the opening sequence with some of the original X-Men members fighting off the Sentinels, showing off how just scary, terrifying the Sentinels are. We then see the China scenes where Professor X is laying out everything, the mission essentially, and then Wolverine goes under, and then we end up in the 70s. All that just goes at like not a rapid pace, but a consistent pace. And I love that so much because that's like the only exposition scene where Professor X is like, in 1973, this whole thing happened, and this is why we're here. We need to stop that in order to possibly like save some of us because they make it very clear that not everyone is going to make it out of this. Like people might not even be born as a result of what they're about to do. I loved
And
it so
Wolverine
much.
does do something horrible. He
He
creates
does.
3 freaking different timelines. He
Yeah.
creates Deadpool's timeline. He keeps their timeline, and then he creates the what's it called, the First Class timeline, where like they move into Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix while they go straight to Logan.
But when we get to the 70s, like I love how they keep the continuity of people always complain about Wolverine having bone claws. For me personally, I did never minded the bone claws. I mean, adamantium is superior, of course, but I don't know, it's a weird thing to nitpick. I've always liked the bone claws personally, and besides, we're leading up to Logan meeting William Stryker and that whole thing going down. So
Yeah.
I never really saw the point of complaining about the bone claws. I like them personally.
I mean, to be fair, I kind of wish he had the claws because he doesn't really the metal claws in the past, but I understand because this is set before Will Stryker puts the metal claws. And I will say that I love Fassbender in this movie. He's so
Oh,
good.
really good.
He Him and McAvoy are great in this movie. I'm like, I love him in the first one, in First Class, and this movie makes me like, dude, you are the best. You are the superior Magneto. No offense, Ian McKellen.
No, Ian McKellen is goated forever and ever, but Michael Fassbender just delivers here. So does McAvoy. One of the best scenes of the movie has no action. It's literally McAvoy and Fassbender fighting, not fighting fists, but using their words. And then when Eric goes,
You are
Azazel,
supposed to
Emma
protect
Frost,
us.
and then the plane just goes all Lou Lally and
Azazel, Emma, Banshee, mutant brothers and sisters, all dead.
and Hank's like, Eric, we're gonna crash. And then
And
Wolverine,
Wolverine's like this, like, ah. He's-
it's so
because
good. It's such an, it's so epic. Just
yeah.
like
And then he
their
calls out Hank.
dialogue.
He said, "You and Hank, you were hiding. You and Hank."
It's such an
Yeah.
epic scene though, because it's not melodramatic. It doesn't waste any time. You get what we learn, what their arguments are in First Class, but they just double down on it because they've had a decade's worth of history to build upon. It's just handled so well.
Like, yeah, because First Class was a movie that it was great. First Class was a great movie, and you're like, there's no way they're gonna top it. And then this one tops it. Like the First Class, I told you off camera, is like Batman Begins.
Yeah.
This is the Dark Knight.
Oh, 100%.
Because
100%.
this is their Dark Knight. Because this literally brings together the X-Men trilogy, and Bryan Singer, of course, regardless of how you feel about him, he directed the first two X-Men movies and is the I would consider next to Matthew Vaughn the best X-Men director. Because
Yeah,
and that's
Brian's
movie X-Men movies, not Logan, Deadpool. I'm saying X-Men movies. Him
Brian
and
Singer,
Matthew Vaughn, I think, are the best.
more than likely, Brian Singer is a horrible human being, but it's like art from artist. You can like separate it, or I can separate it anyway. Like
Yeah.
he absolutely delivered with this one. Let's talk about Quicksilver for a minute, played by Evan Peters, because this character, he's on screen for maybe three, four scenes. But he has one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he is running around that kitchen, soundtrack by Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce.
Again, I would spend them with you.
I love that song. But it's like, and there never seems to be enough time. And he's like, eh. And then he's like giving the guard a wedgie. I'm just like,
He's like pulling the bullet.
this is so much fun.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna say it. I like the Quicksilver scene in Apocalypse too. I think that was a really good scene, especially with Sweet Dreams. Like that to me always makes me laugh. It's like, like we're gonna die. Like like Nicholas Holt's face. That to me always makes me laugh and everything. And I like in this movie though how Quicksilver is kind of like a pain in the ass. Like how
Oh,
he's
he
just
is.
going through the registration. He's like, and it's like and the Beast is like he's fascinating, and Charles is like he's a pain in the ass. He's
I love that.
like,
And then
he's
how
like,
he essentially breaks his dad out of prison if you think about it. Like I
yeah,
love
Magneto.
how they drop the Easter egg of my mom knew someone who could move metal. I wonder what happened to him. I'm like, you're standing right next to him, dude.
I mean, like, especially I like how Magneto. He said like Magneto tells him like after he breaks him out, in a few minutes those gods will be here and to kill us. And then he goes, hold your neck from whiplash. He goes, what? Whiplash. And then he moves in the he's like, he's like, hey, he says, yeah, that happens sometimes. And he goes, what are you here for? He goes, do you know karate? He goes, I know a guy. He's like, I don't know karate, but I know crazy. And then he goes, what are you in for? For killing the president. And then he looks at the security guard that's taped up, that he taped duct tape to the wall. He goes, he mouthed shit. And then the security guard does this face where he's like, like, like that makes me laugh. And it's like, just like, and I think I think that's really funny. And like literally, like, I mean, there's some great stuff in that scene besides Quicksilver is that he's like he says Charles, and Charles punches him in the face. And
I mean,
yeah,
would you
It's good to
expect
see.
anything less? I mean, Magneto stabbed him in the back and cost him his legs until he got hooked on acid. We'll talk about that in a second. But
Yeah.
but when like Charles, I love that so much. But I guess it's as good a place as any to talk about Charles. This is James McAvoy's finest hour as this character by a significant lot. Like I was talking to you, I believe, or I think it was either you or Matt, but the scene where he boots up Cerebro, it fails, and then he's like,
No, that's
I don't
me.
want your suffering, I don't want your
Oh no, that was
future.
me.
And then he's like, read Wolverine's like, read my mind. And so then Charles like reads his mind, and then the old and the young Professor X meet for the first time. And Professor X is like, please,
Charles.
we need you to hope again. That's like top five comic book movie moments for
Yeah.
me.
And especially that whole scene, especially I like first how it starts when he reads Wolverine's mind and he sees Jean and her die and him having to kill her and all that. And he's like, you poor man. He goes, I don't want your suffering. I don't want your future. And he's like, look past mind, Charles. Look past it. And he sees, and then when he's in there with Charles and he goes, and then older Xavier, Patrick Stewart senses him and goes, Charles. And he goes, Charles. And he goes, so this is what happened to us. Eric was right. And he goes, just because someone stumbles and loses their will doesn't mean they're lost forever. And I'm just like that conversation is just so powerful. And then he shows him in his head like all the children that he's doing this for, all the children. You hear that piano play.
And as frightening as it may be, that pain will make you stronger. Hope.
From the teaser trailer for the movie, and just like that, and I'm just like, oh my god, that scene gets me like almost tears me up every time because he's like sees what he's doing this for, and you see like him as an older man looking and seeing all these children, and that to me just has me every time. And then he just looks back like, where he's like, oh my god, like this is like why he has to do this, like he has to save the future for them, not for himself, not for
Yeah. Charles Xavier found his why in that moment. And in the words of Nietzsche, if you have a why, you can bear anyhow.
I mean, they
But
put that in the teaser trailer. Remember, they put that in a teaser. Whereas I don't want your suffering. I don't want your future. And then you see old man. I mean, that literally that moment was so powerful when you see both of them. Because the only thing I didn't like about that scene is how blurry it was because they tried to make it like, oh, this is in his head, so it has to be blurry. And I'm like, no, you should have made it clearer. It's fine. He's
I
like
don't
how they
hate
made
that choice
they dim
personally.
it like.
I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I do see what you're saying there, but it didn't really take me out of it.
I mean, it was still a powerful scene.
When I was rewatching this, I was like, okay, is there something wrong with the camera? And then they focus up and it's fine, but I'm like, like we don't need to know it's a dream. Like we kind of figured it out ourselves.
I mean, well, yeah. What's I think from what it is he's in Wolverine's mind, and then Wolverine, I guess, is talking to him through Charles, but Charles sees Charles. I like how they have Toad again. Like we haven't seen Toad since the first X-Men movie, and you have Toad is just like, but I hate that. I mean, it's not played by Ray Park, obviously, but it's like, but still, and it's like he looks different. But I mean, I like that he had Toad again. I liked how like they show, by the way, that teaser. They showed the Vietnam scene with the Mystique rescuing him in at the end of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, whatever. And I'm like, and by the way, if you watch the re-release, they play the same scene. And you're just like, why?
But speaking of that scene, in that moment, we do meet William Stryker for the first time. And even in the theater when I saw it for the first time, I'm like, that's got to be William Stryker. And then sure enough, it's on his dog tag.
He
So
looks more
that
like Brian Cox than the Danny Hudson.
was
And I
that's a
like
good
Danny Hudson. I thought he was good in that movie. But I'm
he
just saying, he
was.
looks nothing like Brian Cox. He looks like he's the age of Brian Cox. Him and Brian Cox look the same age.
It wasn't a random thing either. Like the Strikers' hatred for mutants has been like there pretty much since the beginning. And he's
Yeah.
basically a hired hand working for anyone of like a similar mind, which brings us to Bolivar Trask, played by Peter Dinklage.
He
And
was basically
talk about striking while the iron is hot. Dinklage had just gotten off of Game of Thrones by that point, and like
yeah,
he
and
was just
Singer
one
said
of the
he
hottest
casted him.
actors in the world.
The reason Peter Dinklage said he accepted the role is because it was not a dwarf role. He said it was just literally, they said, hey, we want you to play this role. It has nothing to do with height. And I'm like, okay, I accept it. And he goes, he's like Hitler, right? Like this guy is like Hitler. He hates mutants. He wants to put them in camps. And he goes, I don't mind that as long as I don't have to play a short guy. I'm good. It's like when he says she could pretend to be you and launch a nuclear strike if she was in the mood.
Because she
And
can.
just
Because she can.
yeah. And like how he plays both sides of the coin. Like he literally goes to like the Vietnamese and tells them, congratulations on winning the war and everything. And he's just like, like, and literally you could tell that he's almost like he's Stryker, but like Trask is Stryker, but like, you could tell. I like how it pays homage to where Stryker is like a mentor, like he's mentoring Stryker. And so basically Stryker's picking up on his hatred for mutants. And like you could tell when he's sitting there looking at the DNA on her, and he's like, oh, fascinating. And he goes, and he said, they can change. And he's like, he says they should be controlled. And he's given a conversation about the mutants, how mutants should be handled. And he goes, you really hate them, don't you? Stryker asked that. Like you could tell he's idolizing him for that. And he goes, I don't think they should. I think we should be able like to control them, And I think like he literally has the same philosophy Stryker does in X-Men 2. Only you could tell this Stryker's picking that like the brain of this guy. He's like, oh, you're basically a monster and you're basically he's basically idle, like you're basically training this other guy to be a monster too, because literally this guy is literally going to be like, he has the same mindset. He's like, and I like that aspect of it where it's like Mystique kills him and then Stryker takes her and then Stryker makes the Sentinels in the future. And instead, Mystique, and I like how Magneto does it. Magneto sees like his trying to protect this. He's like, I'm trying to protect my future. And then he takes the gun as Beast tackles him, and he just does this and makes the gun go off and goes bam, bam, bam. I love that scene. And then how he pulls the bullet, he pulls her. I like how Beast tries to drown him, and all of a sudden he opens his eyes underwater, and then he grabs the metal and pulls Beast off him, and then he tries to pull Mystique leg, and he's pulling that bullet. She's like, he
That
pulls the
hurt.
bullet out of him.
I was
It's
grabbing
like,
my leg when I was seeing that.
yeah. But I do like that. And also I love how like he's stitching his own back of his skull up and literally why like
Yes.
and he's watching the Sentinels and he's like he figures out how to like he studied the blueprints and he's like, I'm gonna reprogram them. And he's basically his plan is he's gonna reprogram them to basically attack the humans and kill them. And I'm thinking that's a crazy and like that whole stadium scene where he picks up that baseball stadium and then drops it on the White House, like, oh my god, it was so badass.
I love how in First Class Michael Fassbender's X-Men like nearly had like a panic attack trying to move a satellite dish, but here like stadium no problem. That was
I
just
mean, you gotta say this is like 20 years later or 30 years later.
a decade later. Fair
A
enough, but at the
decade.
same time, like when this happened, I was like, okay, that's a lot of training in a plastic or not a plastic prison, but a stone prison.
Well, I mean, it's like been like what 65 or whatever, 67. Like this is like 7 years later, and like he killed Kennedy, like or he was arrested for killing Kennedy, which I think that is interesting that they still included the Matthew Vaughn. Well, that was Matthew Vaughn's script, so I mean, obviously they included that in there. But
Yeah.
like, I do like that. That I still like though that the only thing I kind of had issue with was the helmet. I like the helmet, and I own that helmet. Like, because whenever the Blu-ray for Days of Future Past came out, Target was selling the helmet. Like you could buy the Blu-ray and get like in the deluxe edition. And I got the little mini helmet. I do wish though that they kept the First Class helmet, because like but just painted it red. Like because at the end, remember he shows up at the First Class at the end is like in his classic outfit. Even though it wasn't great looking, like an outfit, it just looks like he put a business suit on with a cape. I mean Matthew Vaughn was trying to be comic accurate. You gotta give him that. Still, I do wish that they would have kept the red helmet. I do like his outfit though. His outfit was great. I thought really, especially, I like how in the future you're seeing the X-Men fight as young Magneto is causing chaos. You're seeing the X-Men in the future fight for their lives with the Sentinels. And like, I thought that was so great, especially you're seeing them like how the Barry Storm gets killed by a Sentinel and she falls to her death. And then Magneto is like trying to blow up the ship, the X-Men ship and everything. He gets stabbed. And then, like Kitty, which it depends on which version you watch. If you watch the theatrical cut, the girl that shoots the portals,
Blink.
he jumps into a portal, Blink. But if you're watching the road cut, Kitty comes in and grabs him and pulls him through. But because Rogue is the one that's on Wolverine now, that's in Wolverine's. And I think honestly, it was so great that speech. I've always taught. Anytime I talk about this, I talk about Magneto's speech. He gives that speech where he goes, "You built these weapons to destroy us." He said, "But now we are the ones." Like, and he gives that, and everybody's watching him on the screen, and he makes sure he gives that speech. He's addressing to all the mutants, like, "We no more hiding." Like, he's essentially doing what Shaw trained him, like how these movies, these First Class and Days of Future Past. I think one thing that you could tell that Matthew Vaughn definitely came up with it in these two movies is mentorship, leadership, where essentially you have Kevin Bacon, who was the one who hated humans, and he essentially was like, and then he basically, Magneto sees his point of view and idolizes that point of view of, okay, humans are the enemies, us mutants are the future. And then this one, Stryker, Trask is the one that's like, I hate mutants. We need to put them in camps. We need to lock them up and everything. And these Sentinels are our way. That these are basically to protect us from this mutant invasion. And Stryker is kind of looking up to him that way, like, yes, you are right. I agree. And I like that idea aspect. And then how when he's given that speech about how we are the one that's going to rise up, how Magneto's like, and everything he's saying is coming true in the future. Like literally, all the X-Men are getting murdered brutally, and Stryker and everything Magneto is saying in the future is happening. And you're like, and the sad thing is, you agree with him.
The thing is that this movie is epic. It's got great action, but it doesn't lose sight of having a brain and actually asking tough questions and questions that don't really have easy answers. There's not a clear-cut, I'll use Back to the Future as an example. There's not a clear-cut example of we need to do this to fix the future. Like, if they do this here, it's like a line Beast brought up in the Row Cut, where it's like you throw a pebble into a lake and those ripple effects. So you don't know how those ripple effects are going to work. So you get the real sense that this is like the best bad option that they have. And it's a Hail Mary that works out in the end, but like in like the immediate.
Unfortunately,
But then
one of those futures, Logan, their future, the X-Men in the future, their future goes back to their current core. Like Beast says, like you could throw a pebble and change the ripple, but eventually the ripple will go back into its current form. And so he says, maybe, like, I like the idea how Beast, like, maybe the Sentinels were meant to kill us. Maybe we're all meant to die, and like, and I like how they change it. Like, Wolverine creates 3 different timelines, but like his timeline changes where he's like, oh, the Sentinels are gone and Cyclops is alive and Jean's alive and everything. I mean, it's a beautiful ending. But then of course you get to Loki, you're like, oh, they all died anyway. You're just like,
yeah,
well,
it's
well,
like
I was like,
it's like Thanos once said, dreaded, run from it, destiny arrives all the same.
exactly. And I will say, I do like that Mystique, like she's like more like there's like the scene where she's in Trask office. I love how she is a lot like the Rebecca Romijn's Mystique in this movie. Especially even looks like her. Like they even modeled her design, because if you watch the first one, she looks nothing like Rebecca Romijn Stamos. Even though Rebecca Romijn Stamos has a cameo as older Mystique in First Class.
Yeah.
Literally, if you remember that, if you've seen the scene, like, she says, I prefer the real Mystique. And she goes, how about now? And it's Rebecca Romijn. And then she goes, I meant the real one. Then she's like, I said the real one. Perfection.
Perfection,
Which
yes.
that freaking meme. That's like,
Yeah, Matt and I had a good laugh talking about that one. But to close things out, I did want to bring up this one scene about Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique is kind of hit or miss for me. I think she does her best work here, especially this one scene where she is in Trask's office. Jacob, you touched on it briefly, but he's in the office. She's looking through the files. You see Azazel's decaying body there in the photos of the files, and you just see the tear roll down. And then like Trask's assistant walks in and is like, Mr. Trask, and like in a second, and then she walks out as him, and then you just see like the tear roll down, and he's like, oh, sorry, never mind. Just that was just it's
that was a
just
great
brutal.
scene.
It's brutal, but it's also beautiful at the same time. Brutal full, if you will.
Yeah. the only thing I hated about this movie was the ending. How they had like, like they had Stryker, like what I like how Stryker like pulled, because I love how Wolverine charged at Magneto, and then Magneto does the metal and he twists him, and he said so much for being a survivor and throws him in the lake, the the river, and then of course and then at the end Stryker pulls him out and he says he wants to put him in the Weapon X program. And the only thing I hated was when his eyes turned yellow, in which Singer had said himself, originally they were thinking about going a different direction with that, and he said instead they went the right direction. And he said people said he Singer just said just forget about that, just pretend like the Gill Eyes never happened, and that he said if anything, Singer, you could say that Stryker is experimenting with Mystique's DNA, and that was Stryker the whole time. He said that really was William Stryker, that wasn't Mystique. He goes, Mystique was gone by then. And he said,
I'll,
which I'm
I'll
just
take it.
saying makes no sense. But
Exactly.
he did. But there was, if you watch the road cut, there is a two post credit scenes. There's the Apocalypse scene that we all seen with the Apocalypse that sets up X-Men Apocalypse, and then the other scene is with Trask is sitting in Meg, because if you watch the deleted scene, Trask is arrested for selling secrets. It even says on the newspaper, Trasker is arrested for selling secrets. So,
Yep.
but he was double dealing, for. And so at the end, you see Trask and Magneto cell where they throw him food. He's sitting in a prison outfit, and they throw him food in his cell, and he's just like this, like, I thought that was so funny. Though I thought that was really fun. But
You
yeah,
reap what you
I
sow.
really do like this movie. It's a great film. I love that they brought like everybody. It became full circle, and I know Singer did say that he made this movie as a course correction because he didn't get to make X-Men 3. And so
Yeah.
this was kind of like his like. I mean, a lot of people see this was a course correction X-Men 3, and because a lot of people hated X-Men 3, and so this was a course correction. And then of course Singer did X-Men Apocalypse, and that movie has a lot of problems, but
Uh-huh.
and
But
but
but as far as this movie goes, it's getting an amazing grade from me. It's like I said, the X-Men,
yes.
keyword X-Men, top build, X-Men films would never get better than this. This was the peak. And then it's all downhill from there. But for one shining moment in the sun, past met future, and it just meshed. It just was near perfection across every measure.
And this movie
This
could have
was,
been bad because there
oh
was
yeah,
like one behind the scene problem. There was one behind the scene problem. That Singer apparently left the set for a week and didn't return, like he does on every single movie set he does, where he left. That became more reoccurring in X-Men Apocalypse. But like X-Men Days of Future Past, apparently Simon Kinberg had to direct the scene or something in the movie because Kinberg left the set and had to go, I guess, do this. Had to go like how he did in X-Men 2. Apparently yeah, because that a lot of people said, a lot of people have said that is his biggest issue. A lot of people, because that's the reason mainly why he got fired in Hollywood, was because he's unreliable. Because you know what? I think he would have probably beat the Me Too allegations if he would have just stayed on set of Bohemian Rhapsody and not left the set. If he would have just stayed there, he probably, because he would have literally went to the Oscars and everything. But instead, he just like he's like, Fox told him, don't get on the flight. You get on the flight, you're done. He gets on that flight though, and they're like, all right, you're fine.
you're done.
He's like,
But
yeah, he would have known that getting on that plane would have killed his whole crew.
and he did it anyway. But what did you all
That
think of
cocaine must have been really good.
what did you all think of X-Men Days of Future Past? Let us know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. Jacob is 1/3 of the Small Talk podcast here on this channel. His channel is linked below. What you got coming up?
We got Talking Silence, Small Talk, and I got a review for X-Men: The Official Game.
Yeah,
That
looking
came out in 2006 as a tie. It was more like kind of a tie into the first three X-Men movies. The game was, and so it has Hugh Jackman, Alan Cumming, Patrick Stewart, Sean Ashmore, and all them reprise their voice roles for this video game. It's a really fun game. I've coming out, and also Deadpool 2 review with you coming up and everything, and yeah, and so yeah, that's about it really. It's Small Talk, and yeah.
Yep, go give him a subscribe there. As far as this channel goes, the road continues apace. Next up with the first Deadpool movie. That's one that I have not seen in a good long while, so that's going to be really interesting
It's
to
so good.
I remember really liking it. I saw it
I
with a,
like the movie. I mean, Deadpool 2 I like even more because it's the jokes are more funnier in Deadpool 2.
but I'll be rewatching it for the first time in quite a while. But if you like the video, leave a like, subscribe, do all of that. For Jacob Collins, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you all in the next one. Take care.